what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
For organizations looking to enhance their customer relationships, this is Stepping Up Service. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stepping Up Service for this month. I'm Alan Jackson with the Jackson Group, and with me is Ed Gagnon of Customer Service Solutions. How you doing, Ed?
I'm doing great, Alan. How you doing today?
Doing fine. We are recording this about 3 days before the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 2012, who are you pulling for, Ed?
Let's see, it's the Giants and the Patriots.
Yes.
I'm pulling for the Packers.
Oh, so, good. Well, there you go. Something tells me you're not going to come out victorious after Sunday night.
Yes, I'm already disappointed. So I don't know. We'll just see what happens. I have a lot of relatives up in New England.
Ooh, okay.
But I like, on a personal level, I like what the Giants coach is all about. So it'll probably be one of those games where I just watch and see who I find myself rooting for during the game.
Probably going to be that way, although Lenoir University, the local university here in our hometown, has a couple of the assistant coaches on the Giants staff are former LR, either coaches or alumni. So a little bit of a connection there. I'll probably end up pulling for the Giants just because of those connections, but hopefully it'll at least be a good game. That does lead us into, while we're in this football mentality and we've got football all over the news and media, it's a good time to think about what can we learn from the game of football and the idea of football teams and their culture that maybe we can borrow and port over to the entire customer service culture arena. So I know, Ed, you've got some thoughts on this, some things that you feel like we can learn from football and taking a football approach to how we change our culture when it comes to customer service. So what made you think of this as an idea? I mean, where do you see similarities between what a football team's trying to accomplish, a coach, and what organizations are trying to do with their own culture?
Well, football, I love the sport. I love professional football in particular. I love college football. And when you think about football, they often call it the ultimate team sport, and it really is. I mean, you have 11 people on your offense against their 11 on defense, and there's schemes going on, and everybody knows their role, and they have to make changes on the fly, and certain things happen that are out of your control, and you're still trying to progress down the field. And it's a game where you have a coach, and the coach is trying to kind of choreograph what's going on, but it's really up to the players to play the game. It's really up to the players to execute. It's really up to the players whether you win or you lose in the vast majority of the game. So the reason why football ties in so well to discussions about corporate culture is because there's so much teamwork involved, there's so much leadership involved, there's so much planning involved and execution involved that it really ties into what a typical business has to deal with.
I mean, a lot of times I've always looked at, teams, professional sports teams. I mean, obviously it's a business, and even the team themselves can be almost viewed as a business team unit organization. They have their roles, they have their directions, they have certain boundaries they work within. They have to be creative. They've got to think on their feet. It's all that. So I guess there are some good similarities we can try to learn and borrow from on that.
Sure, we're going to tap into some of those today.
I know in the game of football there's a lot of fours with 4 downs and 4 quarters. We've got 5. I know it's not really a good football number of 5 items we want to hit on right now. So we'll just kind of wing it as we go. But we can't fit them into the 4. There's just too many good ones to put in. So we've got 5 items here to go for. So Ed, why don't you start us off with the first one? Tell us what's one of the first things we can pull from a football team into our culture.
Well, when you're thinking about culture, you're thinking about getting everybody on the same page, going in the same direction. You have to define what that direction is. So the first example that we'll give of tying football to culture is to target the Super Bowl. And what we mean by that is if you think about a typical pro football team, and I'll talk a lot about pro football just because the Super Bowl is right around the time of this recording. When you think about pro football, their goal at the start of the season, before they ever play a game, before they ever have their first practice, is to eventually make it to the Super Bowl.
Sure.
And that's what the ultimate goal is. And so when they talk about changes they need to make in personnel or in scheme and who's going to play what role on the organization. When they go through their practice and they try to run these plays and figure out what's going to work and what's not going to work, it's all geared toward the ultimate goal. And it should be the same way with a business. that what you're doing, you're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. When you're making a change to a process, or you're changing some technology, or you're training staff or hiring staff, you don't just do it for the sake of doing it. You do it because as an organization, you're trying to get somewhere.
Right.
You have a goal in mind. You have some vision that you're trying to achieve. So the first thing you want to do as a business, if you really want to create a culture where everybody's on the same page, going in the same direction, you're very healthy culture, very high-performing culture, it's a lot easier to do that if you define that direction, what you're performing toward, and that is creating an organizational vision.
Well, you think about all the interviews that you hear with football team members and coaches throughout a season, and you never hear them saying, well, we just want to get a decent win-loss record at the end of the season. That's our goal right now. You never hear that.
Right.
It's always, we want the Super Bowl.
Right.
If you're a college basketball team, it's always, we want to be cutting down the nets at the national championship. Nothing else will suffice. And it's interesting. I mean, it may sound obvious for businesses, but there are a lot of businesses out there that sometimes lose sight of that big end goal. And it's all about what do we just need to do to get through today or tomorrow or this next week. And you're right, that's not going to get you where you need to be from not only a business success, but especially in the customer service world too.
Right, and that's a great example that you came up with, where you're trying to identify where you want to be long term. In some sense, you want to make it aspirational. Like you said, the pro football team wants to get to the Super Bowl. They don't want to just have a decent season.
Right.
And it's the same way when you're creating a vision statement for a business. If you look at Southwest Airlines, for example, their vision is to expand our locations, both domestic and overseas, by being the largest and most profitable airline company to achieve both short and long-term carriers efficiently with low cost. That's a lot of words, but there are some key qualifiers in there. You have expand, you have largest and most profitable, you have low cost. They want to have the most productive workforce to guarantee the best flight possible. So when you look at a business like Southwest Airlines, they're not just saying we want to be an airline. That's almost like a very bland mission statement. They're trying to come up with something aspirational.
Sure.
And if you're an employee and you're about to get hired by Southwest, it's a situation where if Southwest talks about their vision during the hiring process, you as a prospective employer are thinking, wow, this organization wants to be the best. They want to make me productive. They want to expand and grow. So to some extent, you're really inspiring your prospective employees, your current employees, your organization, if you have an aspirational type of vision.
Well, and there's two things, especially with that, even that example with Southwest Airlines. Everything that's mentioned in there is something measurable.
Yes.
Are we the largest? Yes or no. Are we the most profitable? Yes or no. Did we expand? Yes or no. I mean, all those things are measurable. It's not just we want to be a great airline, because that becomes such a big open door and it's hard to define. It's being very specific, just like the Super Bowl. Okay, you can't mistake that as a goal. It's like, we want to win the Super Bowl.
Right.
There's no way we can partially win the Super Bowl or get halfway there. It's either we get there or we don't.
Right.
And I love that about those big goals, those big specific ones, because too many times we as organizations just try to put together this real fuzzy vision of where we want to be. And it's hard because every employee can interpret that differently. When you've got something specific and clear, there's no question about it.
Right.
I guarantee you, anybody at Southwest Airlines that works there that at least understands and knows the vision, they know what the goal is. There's no question of, well, we're going to be a mid-range airline that's doing okay profitability. No, this is where we want to be. So that's impressive. That's always good.
Yeah, and those are excellent points. I mean, if you're an employee, you don't go to work at Southwest in theory saying, I want to be mediocre.
Right.
Yeah, this is the day where I want to become average. You're going there because you want to be a part of this vision of greatness that the organization is trying to achieve. And like you say, it needs to be measurable. You want to know when you've achieved your vision.
Great. All right, let's go on to our second football play of the podcast here. What have you got for us?
Well, this may sound basic, but you want to score more than the other guys.
Oh, yeah, that's fairly radical, but I'm sure there's more to it.
There's a little bit more to it. I mean, it's just the idea that you don't just go from preseason to the Super Bowl. You have to play 16 regular season games. You have to win a certain number of those games in order to get to the playoffs. You have to win the playoff games to get to the Super Bowl. So you can't just jump from beginning to end. You can't just jump from this is where I want to be as an organization to achieving my vision. There are milestones, there are steps along the way. And organizations that particularly want to change the culture, they want to recognize when they're actually moving toward the vision that they have for an organization, they identify what those milestones are. And in some organizations, we would refer to those milestones as being a rallying point. It's something nearer term than the vision. The vision might be out 5 or 10 years, but it's something you want to achieve in a year or 2 years.
Okay.
For a pro football team, a milestone might be we want to get to the playoffs.
Sure.
Or in some cases, pro coaches will actually divide up their 16-game season into 4 quarters because it's a 4-month season before you even get to the playoffs. A lot of them say, well, this is our first 4-game set. And we have 3 games on the road. We want to come out of here at least 2-2, 3-1.
Okay.
I mean, what can we do in these 4 games to kind of establish an identity? And then they go to the next 4 and the next 4. They break it up into bite-sized chunks.
Okay, I see.
And they can define if they're achieving the successes on these milestones along the way.
I guess what I'm hearing is even though you've got that large, big goal, that big vision, there are a lot of individual steps, obviously, that have to help you get there. You can't just say, we're going to go win the Super Bowl and not have those short-term strategies and plans for getting there.
Right.
Yeah. So it's looking backwards in a way, working back from that big vision. How are we going to get there? Let's make sure we can chop this up into digestible pieces that we can rally around and focus on each step of the way. And as long as we're meeting those individual objectives, the idea is it is getting us closer and closer to that ultimate vision.
Right. I mean, if you were to create a strategic plan that would be in tremendous detail and say everything you needed to do over the next 10 years to achieve the vision in 10 years, it would be daunting.
Sure.
And a lot of what you might define today that you're going to do in year 4 might change drastically because it's just a different world 4 years down the road. But if you know where the vision is that you want to get to, and you can define, well, what do I want to do in this first year? What do I want to achieve by the end of this 12-month period? And you can identify what that is and make it something that you can actually achieve and work toward and knock those key points out so that you've achieved the first milestone. Then, like you say, you've kind of narrowed the scope down, at least for this first year, a little bit. At the end of the year, you feel like you've hit the milestone and you've begun the process of moving toward the ultimate vision.
Okay. Great. All right. That makes sense to me. That sounds good. What have we got as a third option here?
Well, this one is maybe sounding overly simplified, but know who to block. Okay, so you have this plan, and this is where we want to be over the next 5-10 years, and this is what we want to do over the next year. But remember when we talked early on about the pro football teams, the coach might end up identifying the game and the strategy and the schemes on offense and defense, but the players have to execute.
Okay.
So in order to actually create the kind of culture you want, in order to really move toward the vision that you're looking for, it has to be abundantly clear with employees what their role is. I mean, think about it. You could have the greatest quarterback in the world. You have Joe Montana, Johnny Unitas, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers. Have to throw in my obligatory Packer.
Oh, yeah. I noticed that one in there, yes.
Bart Starr, Brett Favre, anyway. Well, maybe not Brett Favre. We'll have to think on that one. But basically, you could have the best quarterback in the world, the best receivers in the world. You got Lance Allworth and Jerry Rice out there, the best tight ends. And it's a pass play. Yeah. And the right guard knows who they're supposed to block. The left guard doesn't. So the left guard kind of blocks the wrong guy, helps out the tackle. And then this defensive lineman or linebacker just shoots the gap and just knocks out the quarterback.
Plows through 'em.
Yep. You have the most skilled people in the world, but because one person didn't know his job, the play fails.
Okay.
So especially when you're thinking about organizations from a business perspective, people need to understand what their individual role is and how it relates to others in the organization. Oftentimes, you have organizations that basically are set up in silos. And, I'm in marketing and I do the best I can do to market our organization. But I don't realize that maybe I'm promising certain things through my marketing messages that my operations can't deliver.
Okay.
I'm in sales and I'm trying to sell this new account, and I sell the new account, but I don't realize the kind of information that my customer service folks, my account reps need to manage the account after they get the account. So I'm not gathering the kind of information that they need. And all of a sudden you start to realize if people don't know their roles and how what they do impacts others in the organization, then things can start breaking down. The culture doesn't work very well. It's not a high-performing organization. You have a bunch of silos who maybe individually are doing okay, but organizationally we're not doing well. So to create the kind of culture you want, you need to have leaders who are very clear in articulating what everybody's role is and how they all relate to each other.
Well, I think even to extend the football metaphor a little bit more, I mean, on a football field, you've got your assistant coaches, you've got your people over the offense, you got your people over the defense, special teams. They all have their teams that they may be working in, and you could almost see it as a silo. But if they're not looking and working with those other teams collectively, you've got individual sub-teams all working, on their own path, and it's just not going to get them to their end result.
Right.
So the idea is here really knowing what everybody's role is, making sure they know exactly what they're set up to do. I could also imagine, too, there may be a little bit of sometimes when you find a skill set in somebody in your team, making sure you're applying that skill set to where it's going to best benefit the organization. Make sure you've got good people in the right places, too. So it's not a matter of somebody's here and they're filling this role, but they're really not the best performer for that role, but they're there just because that's where they've been for a while. So maybe it's sometimes looking at your roster and figuring out where there may be best use of those resources and putting them in those right plays as well.
Right. And it's a lot easier for members of the organization to see where those gaps exist or the specialized skills exist if the silos don't exist. If they're communicating well, if everybody knows their role and how it impacts others and what others' role are. So when you're thinking about an organization, you really want to make sure that everybody knows what their role is, what they're there to do. And if they don't have the skills they need, there are processes, there's training, there's technology in place to help build up the skill set, to help build up the capabilities of the individuals to succeed in the organization.
Okay, got it. Well, we're going to take a really quick break before we go on to number 4 and 5 here on our list. Just a reminder, you're listening to Stepping Up Service here on the Mesh Network. Themesh.tv is the website if you want to see other shows and things we have going on here at the network. Ed, think of a 4-digit sequence, any 4 numbers you want. Doesn't matter.
Go ahead and give it to you.
Yep, give them to me right now.
3829.
3829. Okay, well, that is our code. It'll be the word football with the 4-digit code 3829. Football 3829 is the code for this episode if you're playing along at home on our contest to win an iPad after this quarter's worth of episodes. So good luck with that.
We'll get back to your show in a moment. Just a reminder, you're listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Find out more at themesh.tv and give us feedback on what you like. And now, as promised, back to your show.
Hi, this is Alan with the quick announcement about something really exciting going on here at The Mesh over the next couple of months. The Mesh is celebrating its first 6 months of operation by giving one of its listeners an iPad 2. And the more you listen to The Mesh, the more chances you have to win. Here's what you do. Listen to any episode for any of the shows that we have on our Mesh network that we post between January 1st, 2012 and March 31st, 2012. At some point during those episodes, and that includes the one you're listening to, you will be given a code for the contest. Write the code down, visit the Mesh's website at themesh.tv, and you'll be given instructions on where to enter your code and an email address. You can enter one code per episode with your email address. So if we post 100 episodes between January and March of this year, and you listen to all 100 of them and get 100 codes, that means you'll have 100 entries into our contest, 100 chances to win that iPad. There will be other information on the Mesh's website about this contest, other rules, regulations, some other legal jargon we got to put in there. That's all on the website at themesh.tv/contest. That's where you can enter your codes, and you can also read a little bit more about the contest itself. We really are excited about this contest. We're excited about giving one of our listeners a great prize. And we just want to thank everybody for an incredible first 6 months of The Mesh. We look forward to providing you with outstanding content for many, many more months to come. Thanks. I'm with Ed Gagnon, Customer Service Solutions. Ed, your website, remind us before we continue here, is cssamerica.com?
Correct.
Okay. And one thing I keep meaning to ask you about, I've never had a chance to ask you here during our show, but you actually wrote a book not too long ago, right?
Yep, sure.
Okay,
did.
and what's the name of the book, and how can people find out more about that?
It's called Ask Yourself, Am I Great at Customer Service? And the idea is that in all the work we've done, mystery shopping, training, consulting with different organizations, we've identified the 25 characteristics of people who are truly great at customer service.
Okay.
We're just tired of hearing people say, well, our customer service is fine, our customer service is good, and yet we see so many examples where it's not.
Right.
So if you as an individual employee, an individual account representative, or you're a manager and you want to make sure all your people know what does it truly mean to be great at customer service, that's what this book does. It tells you those key qualities. And we actually have a website for the book. It's amigreatat.com.
Am I Great At, so AMIGREATAT.com.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep,
great.
that's great.
So people can find out more about the book and order it if they're interested in that too.
Sure,
So-
yeah. It's Kindle, it's Smashwords, it's Amazon, or order direct from us as well.
Wonderful. Great.
Thanks.
Good. All right. Well, let's continue on with our lineup, our 5 goals for taking a football approach to changing your customer service corporate culture there. So I think we're up to number 4. What's number 4 there?
Yeah, number 4 is huddle like a football team. We talked in the last example about knowing who to block, everybody understanding what their roles are. And one key to creating a culture which is very healthy internally is that everybody's talking to everybody.
Yes.
At least they're knowledgeable of what's going on in the other areas. And you can look at this huddle, these communications from a couple different perspectives. One is across those silos. Typically if I work in a certain area of an organization, I have inputs from coworkers. If I am in that operations area, the input is the order that's coming in from the sales folks. And I have outputs as well. I'm sending that product out, and it might go through customer service or the account rep to get to where it needs to be, or the sales floor. Whatever the case might be, that there is some connection between what I'm doing and the information and services and supplies I'm getting, and then the output from my area. So there need to be continuous communications going on horizontally between the different silos. But just like in pro football, there need to be vertical communications going up and down. I mean, the organization needs to constantly preach at the executive level, at the management level. Remember, this is what our vision is. All these things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, when we change our systems, we change our organizational structures, we change our processes, we're doing that because we want to achieve this vision. So the second aspect of communication is you need to make sure that leadership is continuously talking about the vision, so that people aren't just doing the work for the sake of doing it. They understand that there's this greater goal out there, and we're all working as a team to get there. And the third way to think about communication is also vertical, but it's kind of the bottom up. Making sure there's a continuous dialogue where staff are giving you the kind of information as a leader that you need to make decisions.
Well, this whole thing with communication, I mean, gosh, we've got several shows here on the network that talk about leadership, and some talk about very specific practices for caring for patients in the healthcare industry. Communication, this is the one I can probably key on the most, because it's actually one, in all honesty, I'm having to even work on more here at my own company and other places. We're finding ourselves getting to a size right now where communication issues are our biggest trip up. I mean, it's not the production of work we do. It's not the expertise we share with clients. It's not any of that. It's how we internally share information and make sure we're not tripping on ourselves. So I'm all for this idea. We actually even incorporated the word huddle into something that we do every week, where every Monday morning, first thing in the morning, it is a quick 15-minute huddle. They're just in a big open area in our office where everybody's there. You come in, and that's where that universal sharing of information is. If somebody's got a project that they need to make sure several other people know what's happening with it, it is mentioned right there in that huddle. If there's a office-wide announcement we want to make sure everybody hears, it's mentioned there. That's not to say we're not going to use email or anything in our intranet to share that information, but the huddle is at least a way that we can verbalize what it is on our minds, and somebody has that quick dialogue if they have a question. I just think you've got to have all those forms of communication working to where everybody's getting the information they need.
Yeah, that's wonderful that y'all are doing that. And when you think about communication, think about it strategically as well. I mean, we work with clients on projects, and oftentimes we're not just doing the work and creating a project plan and the Gantt chart and executing that. But typically when we do a project with a client, we create a concurrent communications plan. So just like it says in week 1, week 2, week 3, we're going to do these things in the project, we also say in week 1, week 2, week 3, we're going to do these types of communications about the project, because we want to make sure that the stakeholders in the project aren't just learning about the outcomes that they're going to be impacted by 3 months down the road when it's about to be implemented. We want to make sure there's continuous dialogue. So when you think about communicating in an organization, think about planning. Okay, what are the kind of messages we need to be sending? Well, it's the urgent issue. It's the FYIs that happen once a month about an HR change. It's the client-specific information. It's some new technology project going on. I mean, you think about the different types of communications. You think about the methods that you have to communicate. It's the face-to-face one-on-one. It's the huddles. It's the individual team meetings. It's, all these emails that go out. And then you think about how can we structure methods of delivering information, receiving and soliciting information back from employees about their needs or about what they're hearing from the voice of the customer. How do I create a proactive strategy for communicating different types of information via different methods over time? And when you take that kind of strategic look at communications, you may have the perfect plan in your organization, or you might say, I have certain gaps. Now, the reason why we're fighting so many fires and having to have all these certain meetings when issues crop up is that we're not communicating with certain stakeholders up front, and they're not well informed. And you start to fill in the gaps in the communication that can cause a lot of business problems.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of bringing it back to the football example, too. And you know how many times they will show you clips of in the locker room, either before or after a game, the coach talking to the team. We see this all the time. We see what the coaches are saying. I guarantee you those coaches are not saying, well, just remember what we talked about 3 weeks ago, and it's basically the same message now. Or thinking to themselves, well, I don't really need to remind the guys what we're shooting for or where we're going. They remember from last week or 2 weeks ago. No, it's every week these coaches are responsible for keeping that vision in front of those players, reminding them of what they need to do that day or next week or whatever it may be. It's a constant messaging. I don't think any of those coaches take for granted that their players remember every single word and have them on the front of their brain every single minute of the day. It's constant reinforcement of those messages. So.
Right. And just one example, just to go back to a Packers example, but last year when they won the Super Bowl, in the preseason, they have a meeting room, and in that meeting room, they have posters on the wall. They're not really posters; they're framed photos, team photos of every team that ever won a world championship in Green Bay. Wow. And at the start of last season, at the time they had won 12 world championships. At the start of last season, the coach put up a frame without a picture.
Yes.
And every time the players walked into that room, they saw that frame without the picture, and that was the message that's what we're shooting for this year.
Nice.
We want our picture in that frame.
Yeah, if you take for granted, if you're running a company and let's say we've come up with a vision, we've come up with a strategy, and you publish that somewhere on your little company intranet or send it out as an email document months ago, you cannot expect or assume that everybody is going to pull that document up every day or every week and remind themselves and reread it. That's what I think a lot of companies do. They say, well, we put it out there. We shared it at our company retreat a year ago. You got to do more than that, because I just, employees have enough going on. We all have things happening and things taking our attention away. Sometimes employees, we all need to be reminded of that vision and getting that communication going with that.
Yeah, and one nice thing about the reminder is a vision can be a great litmus test. If you have these staff that feel like they're just drowning in the work and they kind of question, should I really be doing all this? At some point, they can just look at that vision and say, well, if what I'm doing does not help us to move toward that vision, I need to question whether I need to be doing this at all.
Yeah.
And it's a great litmus test to say, do I really need to be doing what I'm doing, or refocus where I'm spending my time?
Yeah. Did you ever watch the TV show Friday Night Lights?
A little bit here and there. Never saw a full episode, but a little bit here and there.
Right. Just I'm smiling over at our recorder, Mary Margaret, who is also a big fan of the show. I got hooked on the show watching it on Netflix just in the last year. But just one moment I remember, Coach Eric Taylor, who I think just a great coach, fictional character, but I'm sure patterned after many, many good coaches.
Sure.
High school football coach. First practice of the year, he pulls the guys together in the locker room, takes out the whiteboard, and just writes the word state up on the whiteboard. State championship is that's their goal. And that stayed up there the entire season. It never got erased. It never got touched. Every practice, every session they held, that word's up there on that board, and that's it. That's all it took to get those guys refocused every single week on what they're shooting for. So good stuff.
Keep their eye on the vision.
There you go. Okay, so we've got one more. Our last play for the game here. What's our
fifth down?
Fifth down. so must be some sort of strange foreign version of football. But
Exactly.
yeah. So what's our fifth play here, Ed?
It's to get first downs on the way to success or on the way to your scores. I mean, it's kind of the idea that I know a lot of times people think, well, we're down 14. What we'll do is we'll score that 14-point touchdown. That does not exist.
No, right.
We'll just throw 2 Hail Marys and we'll be back in the game.
We'll be back right in the game.
Piece of cake. That's the way it works. And that's not really the way it works. There is a process to getting to the ultimate goal, to scoring more points in the competition, to doing great in your first 4 games of the season, to making the playoffs, to getting to the Super Bowl, to win the Super Bowl. It starts with small successes. It starts with making those first downs. And what organizations need to do as they make those first downs on the way to their scores is just celebrate.
Yes.
You did something great job. Throw a party, have some recognition, bring some employee into a management meeting just to thank them, throw a little party, but continuously celebrate your successes. I mean, organizations that want to change behaviors, they can do a lot of different things to change behaviors. For some staff, it's just telling them what do you expect. For others, it's having that accountability. People don't want to get dinged on their evaluation. But for the vast majority of people, if you want to start changing behaviors, you want to start rewarding the kind of behaviors that you're looking for. You want to start rewarding success. And that's one thing. If you're trying to change a culture, you really need to build into the process is how can we make sure that when we see the kind of culture we want, we're getting the kind of outcomes we want, that we are celebrating those successes.
Wow. I remember going to a college football game back when I was in school, and I had a family member come and join me for the game, someone who wasn't really that versed in football, didn't know much about it. And every time Carolina Tar Heels, I'll go ahead and say I'm rooting from the home team there, every time they scored a first down, the crowd went wild. Cheerleaders are doing the special play. It's a big booming voice over the loudspeaker.
Yeah.
And the person with me is like, okay, I don't get it. They just moved the ball like a few extra yards. And it's like, well, no, it's a milestone. It's like you're building for it, and you need to celebrate it. And the fact is, everybody in the crowd knows you get a first down, we're getting closer. Let's celebrate it. Let's have fun with it. Let's do a cheer, all of that. It's the same idea you're talking about. So don't ignore those little victories, those little steps on the way to your overall vision, because you're building on it.
Yes.
And if you don't celebrate them, you run the risk of your team getting a little deflated, maybe getting a little burnout. That we keep moving forward, but just because we're not at the big goal, we're just getting overwhelmed. We're getting overworked. You can celebrate them, those little steps along the way, and make everybody know that, hey, we're getting there. Let's enjoy this moment, and then we'll start focusing on the next one. So,
right. Yeah. I mean, if you think about a vision could take 3, 5, 10 years or longer to achieve. Yeah. That's a long wait to have a celebration. Even a rallying point could take a year or 2 years to achieve that major milestone on the way to the vision. That can be a long way to wait for people to be able to celebrate. But if you can constantly reward and recognize and celebrate along the way, when behaviors truly do change, when milestones truly are reached, when outcomes truly are achieved, then you're continuously motivating staff. You're continuously getting them to realize the kind of behaviors that get them praise, and you're really trying to carry in a very positive way the organization toward that vision.
Absolutely. I love that idea of celebrating along the way. I think too many times we all get so wrapped up in just that big picture thing we're going after, and we got to remember to enjoy the steps that are getting us there too. So,
definitely.
Very nice. Okay, very cool. So five things we can take from a football culture to apply into our own workplace for customer service and just overall strategy and success of that organization as well. So very, very neat. Well, Ed, I know we normally like to cap off with a customer service example or story that we've had from recent. Do you have one?
Yes, I do.
Is it positive or negative?
Positive.
Oh, good. I've got a negative one.
Okay,
So, we got the nice yin and yang going on there.
Yes.
So we're not, is yours a football one?
No.
Okay,
no.
mine's not either. I tried to think of a football example. I couldn't come up with one.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to come up with great examples for customer service in football. So, I kind of went the termite cockroach route. So,
okay, good.
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let me do the negative one so we can end on a positive note. Is that okay with you? Yeah. So, great. So, my negative one actually just happened yesterday. And it involves being on the phone tech support, which I think a couple of our examples have been about on the phone customer service.
Yes.
But honestly, that's where if you have a problem in a process, over the phone is going to highlight that problem probably better than any other method you could think of. I'm doing some work for a client, and we're trying to get them set up with their website communications and how they're going to be talking to the public and some other things they want to share. And they're trying to get some things set up where they can do some basically like e-commerce on their site. How can we get it to where people can buy these things online?
Sure.
And I got put in touch with a company that I'd never worked with before. I don't know anything about them. I didn't even know who they were. But I read all their information, tons of documentation about how their service works. Very confusing, meaning they have 5 or 6 different labels or names for services that to me all sound like they do the exact same thing. And it was extremely complex to try to figure out what exactly this firm does and how am I going to work with them. So I got to the point where I was just frustrated with the documentation, so I had to end up calling the phone number. And I was told by the sales rep, this is the tech support phone number. Call them and they can get you squared away. So I call, and I did get picked up very quickly. I didn't have to be on hold. That was all really good. Got on the phone with the person and trying to explain in the simplest way I can what I'm trying to accomplish. This person just did not follow me in any way I described this. It's almost like we were talking about 2 completely different things that we're trying to accomplish. Her message back to me was, we can't do that. That's not the way this works. But I'm able to read to her in the documentation, but it says right here, I do this and this happens. And where am I missing the disconnect here? And, she had to put me on hold and say she had to go talk to somebody else in her office to find out if she could figure out what I'm talking about. And it was just this idea that the process, this company just made it so complex to understand what they do and how to make things happen. I'm sure she was doing the best she could, and I'm sure she's probably a little confused about, was it version 3 or was it version 2 or which product were you using that sounds like you're using this product instead of this one. It's confusing for her too, I'm sure as well. But the problem was I'm the customer. I'm the one that ultimately is having to make this work. And I came out of that phone call not knowing, is this even possible? I don't even know what product that they have, what service I'm using. It was where they made it so complex with names and labels and systems that you just kind of want to step back and say, you know what, you guys are splintered way too much. You need to streamline some of these things because it's confusing me as a customer. So that really wasn't the attitude thing that we normally talk about with people. This is a true process system and explaining to the customer how things work. And getting somebody like me, who I consider myself fairly tech savvy, I can follow these things pretty well. And when I'm overwhelmed and not knowing what I'm even doing with it, that's not a good sign.
Yeah, so. And that's interesting because we've talked about communication a lot today, and that's an example where it sounds like I'm making a little bit of an assumption here, but an organization can create something, especially since they know their business better than anybody, that is clear as day to them. But if they were to give it to somebody who doesn't talk their language, doesn't use their terminology, doesn't have the same technology that they use on a daily basis, they could look at the same document and it's just clear as mud.
Yes.
So it's a great lesson learned for any kind of business. When you are providing a manual, when you are providing some kind of a guide, a how-to, when you're providing directions on your website or whatever the case might be, sure, it might seem clear to you, but try to test it with people who don't know your business. They're not as knowledgeable on your policies and procedures as you are, so they can kind of give you a reality check, from the perspective of somebody who's not immersed in your company on a day-to-day basis. Is this simple enough to understand?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even a even more pointed comment I would make to anybody is, don't throw more brand names, product names, service names into the mix just for the sake of having them out there because you think it looks impressive to have more service names than you really need.
Yes.
Sometimes going simpler is better.
Right.
Because there again, with this experience, I was told about 4 or 5 different products that all sounded exactly the same to me. But yet, because of that fragmentation, I had no idea where I'm supposed to be going with anything. So anyway, it was frustrating. It was a good 30, 40 minutes of my day I didn't get back, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, the marketing people of the world love the Xanadu 2000, but the customer loves when they realize it's just a light switch.
Exactly.
It makes it a lot easier
Give me
to
something
understand.
simple. Help me understand. When I go to your website, I want to be able to click on a simple link, simple button to understand what it is I'm looking at. Don't make me try to decipher your lingo and your codes and acronyms on my own. Yeah. All right. So help pick me back up here. Bring me a good customer service example.
Well, let's call this segue from technology to termites. How does that sound?
I'm very excited now.
Yeah. Well, you won't be after the story. It wasn't that exciting a story. It's just kind of a quick customer service story.
But it does involve termites.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. So.
Well, every year we have our exterminating company come to our house just to kind of evaluate, look for termites, drill all over the house. I'm not sure exactly how they do what they do, and check moisture levels in the crawl space, that sort of thing. And we had an appointment set up about a week and a half prior to the actual appointment date. The employee was supposed to come between 8 and 8:30. And I typically, if I hear a window, even if it's that tight, I'm fine when it's in the window, but once it starts getting a couple minutes after the window, that's when I start getting nervous because you have so many bad experiences with companies just totally missing the time frames. Well, I get a phone call at 8:24, 8:25. He said, we had some truck trouble, mechanical trouble, but I'm on my way. According to the GPS, I'll be there at 8:34.
Okay.
And this is a situation where he was only going to be 4 minutes late. But he called enough cared enough to call and reset my expectations.
Okay.
He shows up, and I said, "Hey, you look familiar." And he said, "Yes, Mr. Gagnon, I've been here a couple times doing your annual inspections. It's great to see you again." And he said, if you could just open up the garage, that would be great. And I remember exactly where the crawl space is. I'll go back there.
Sure.
And I thought that was great. And then he comes back and he gives me the report. It's a positive report, which was nice to hear. Mm-hmm. And we had a couple issues in the house, certain bugs in the house. I won't give you the gory details, but I was asking for his advice. I'll just leave it at that. And he couldn't give me an exact answer on what we were looking at, what kind of insects these were, because I couldn't give him enough detailed information. Mm-hmm. But what he did say was, well, you have a couple options. You can either if you catch these certain bugs and these things, bring it to our office. We can look at it under the microscope. We can analyze it. You can take a photo. You can email it to us. We'll do some analysis that way.
Right.
And then we ended the conversation. It was great. But this is an example of what the gentleman basically did was he drilled some holes in my walls to check for termites. Right. He checked the moisture level. He kind of looked around. And if you think about that as a commodity, who cares who does that?
Sure.
But his approach was he remembered me.
Yes.
And he remembered my house. Mm-hmm. And he could convey respect. He could show some interest. I didn't give him enough information to really have him help me out at the end of the conversation, but he didn't say, well, you need to give me more than that. Yeah. He didn't come back and blame the customer for him not being able to help. What he did was he offered some alternatives. So if you think about specifically what he did, it's something that probably every exterminating company would do. But if you think about how he did it, how he personalized it, how he gave me alternative options when he couldn't give me the exact answer I was looking for at that time, it was a great, even if brief, great customer service experience.
That's wonderful. I'm just amazed by the whole calling a few minutes before the window to say I'm going to be a few minutes late. That's amazing. You don't see that much. And I can even remember back when I first got started working out of college. I would have a little problem with running late to meetings and if it was 3, 4, 5 minutes late, I never thought twice about it at that point. I always thought, oh, it's fine. I'm just a few minutes late. And it finally hit me one day. Okay, no, this is not good. I mean, I need to be the one calling them if I'm going to be even 5 minutes late. Because 5 minutes in an organization can be a long time. Yes. And especially if it's somebody waiting for a response on an urgent issue, 5 minutes is a lifetime. So I've become very diligent about if I know I'm not going to be there ahead of time, I go ahead and call. Whether I'm on the road, wherever I am, I got to call. Yeah. And it's something I had to be guilted into after a while. But it is extremely important. Time is just so valuable for people. Nobody wants to feel like their time is being misused or wasted.
Yeah. That's great you do that. Good customer service,
Thank
Alan.
You. Yeah, good.
Yes.
I got through my younger years and my few little missteps there, and I feel like I'm learning as I go with that. So that's good. Great. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for today's Stepping Up service. Ed, thanks so much for coming in. I really appreciate it. I always enjoy our time talking together.
Yeah, had a good time.
Yeah, we'll look forward to prepping some topics for our next couple episodes as well. In the meantime, though, you can go back and listen to any of the episodes we've recorded since the very beginning. They're all up on the website at themesh.tv. If you want to learn a little bit more about Ed and his company, Customer Service Solutions, you can visit them at cssamerica.com. Find out everything Ed's doing in the customer service world, from consulting to some training to everything in between. Also, we mentioned the book, so check that out as well. Ask yourself, am I great at customer service? At amigreatat.com. And then I'm at the Jackson Group, which is thejacksongroup.com, conducting employee customer satisfaction surveys and leadership development in that area as well. So with that, we'll sign off. Although I did forget, I always forget the mesh line. You know, I got to make sure I got a note out here to remind me about this. But we actually do have a phone number for if anybody has questions, comments about the show, or would like to maybe suggest an idea for future shows. We'd love to hear from you. Call the mesh line at 828-619-0048, and you can leave a message. Somebody will listen to the message, and we'll get it to the right place. And if it's about this show, we'd love to hear from you. Give us some feedback. Let us know what you think. So with that, now we can officially sign off. Ed, thanks so much. We'll look forward to talking to you next time.
All right. Thank you, Alan.
Take care.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.